The voicemail came in at 2:47 a.m., barely audible through the static and fear. 8-year-old Marcus had managed to grab his mother's phone while hiding in the closet, whispering words that would send chills down any parent's spine. "He's back. Mommy's crying again. Please help us." The message was meant for his Aunt Sarah, but fate had other plans. Sarah lived next door to Tommy Reaper Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran of the Bandidos motorcycle club, and when she received that terrifying message, she knew exactly who to call. Tommy had seen enough darkness in his 43 years to recognize the desperation in a child's voice. As Sarah played the voicemail, his jaw tightened with a familiar rage, not the wild, destructive kind, but the controlled fury of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus's stepfather had been escalating his abuse for months, and despite multiple police reports and restraining orders, the system had failed this family repeatedly. Within minutes, Tommy's phone was buzzing with calls to his brothers. The Bandidos had a code that ran deeper than any law written on paper: protect the innocent, especially children. Word spread through the chapter like wildfire, from the clubhouse to home garages, from late-night diners to 24-hour truck stops. Each call carried the same urgent message. A child was in danger, and they were the only ones who could respond fast enough to make a difference. By 3:30 a.m., the rumble of 50 Harley-Davidson engines echoed through the quiet suburban streets. These weren't just motorcycles. They were war horses carrying modern-day knights toward a battle that the legal system had already lost. The neighbors who peered through their curtains that night witnessed something extraordinary: a brotherhood mobilizing with military precision, united by a single purpose that transcended their tough exterior. The sight of 50 leather-clad bikers rolling through suburbia might have seemed intimidating to most, but for one terrified mother and her son, it represented something far more powerful than fear. If you believe in the power of brotherhood standing up for the innocent, hit that subscribe button and join a community that celebrates real heroes in action. The convoy moved through the darkness like a river of chrome and leather, each rider understanding their role without a single word being spoken. Tommy led the formation, his 20 years of military experience evident in the way he coordinated the group's movements. Behind him rode men from all walks of life: construction workers, mechanics, business owners, veterans, united by their commitment to the Bandidos creed and their shared hatred of those who prey on the defenseless. As they approached the modest 2-story house on Maple Street, the sound of their engines served as both announcement and warning. This wasn't a random act of vigilante justice. It was a carefully planned intervention by men who understood that sometimes the system fails and ordinary citizens must step up. The stepfather, Derek Hawkins, had a history of domestic violence spanning 3 states, yet he continued to slip through legal loopholes and exploit bureaucratic delays that left families vulnerable. The bikers positioned themselves strategically around the property, their presence creating an impenetrable wall of protection. Tommy dismounted first, his boots hitting the pavement with purpose as he approached the front door. The porch light flickered on, and through the window they could see movement: a woman's silhouette backing away from a larger figure, who was clearly agitated by the unexpected arrival of 50 motorcycles. Inside the house, Marcus pressed his face against his bedroom window, hardly believing what he saw. The cavalry had actually come, just like in the movies his father used to watch with him before the cancer took him away. His mother, Janet, stood frozen in the living room as Derek's drunken rage transformed into something closer to panic. The man who had terrorized a family for months suddenly found himself face to face with consequences he couldn't manipulate or intimidate away. The night air thrummed with potential energy as Tommy stepped onto the porch, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether this family would finally find peace or continue living in fear. The sound of leather creaking and boots shifting on gravel created a symphony of solidarity that would change everything. Tommy's knock on the door was firm but controlled, the knock of a man who had learned to channel violence into something more powerful: the promise of violence. When Derek opened the door, the color drained from his face as he took in the sight of 50 bikers arranged like an army across his front yard. These weren't the stereotypical outlaws from movies. They were disciplined, focused, and absolutely serious about their mission. "We need to have a conversation," Tommy said, his voice carrying the weight of 5 decades of hard living and harder choices. Behind him, engines idled in perfect synchronization, creating a low rumble that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. Derek tried to muster his usual bravado, the same intimidating presence he used to terrorize Janet and Marcus, but his voice cracked as he demanded to know what they wanted. The conversation that followed was brief and crystal clear. Tommy explained that they had received a distress call from a frightened child, and they took such calls very seriously. He outlined Derek's options with the precision of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations: leave voluntarily and never return, or be removed by 50 men who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. There were no threats of violence, no dramatic speeches, just the simple mathematics of consequence. Janet appeared in the doorway behind Derek, her face bearing fresh bruises that told the story of why they were all there. Marcus peeked around his mother's legs, his 8-year-old eyes wide with wonder at the sight of his unlikely rescuers. The boy had called for help, and help had arrived in the form of men who understood that sometimes justice requires citizens to step up when institutions fail. As Derek gathered his belongings with shaking hands, the transformation in the household was immediate and profound. The fear that had permeated every corner of the home began to lift, replaced by something Janet hadn't felt in months: hope. The bikers maintained their positions, a living wall between a family and their tormentor, as one chapter of terror finally came to an end. Within 30 minutes, Derek's truck disappeared down the street, never to return to Maple Street again. But the real magic of that night wasn't in the departure of one coward, it was in what happened next. As the immediate threat vanished, the Bandidos didn't simply ride away into the night. Instead, they transformed from protectors into a support network, demonstrating that their commitment to this family extended far beyond a single dramatic intervention. Over the following weeks, the Brotherhood's care for Janet and Marcus took on countless forms. Brothers who worked in construction repaired the damaged front door and installed better security systems. Those with legal connections helped Janet navigate the restraining order process and connected her with victim advocacy resources. Members who owned businesses offered Janet employment opportunities, while others provided reliable transportation and childcare when needed. Marcus, who had lived in fear for so long, began to flourish under the protective wing of his unlikely guardians. The bikers taught him about motorcycles, shared stories of their own children, and showed him what healthy masculinity looked like. Tommy became a regular presence in the boy's life, not as a replacement father, but as a mentor who demonstrated that real strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them. The story of that night spread throughout the community like wildfire, inspiring others to take action when they witnessed injustice. Neighbors who had previously turned a blind eye to domestic violence began speaking up and offering support. Local businesses started partnering with the Bandidos on community protection initiatives, recognizing that these leather-clad guardians were more effective than traditional security measures. What started as one desperate voicemail had created a network of protection that extended throughout the entire neighborhood. If stories like this inspire you to believe in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, drop a comment below and share your own experiences with unexpected heroes who made a difference in your life. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the same porch where his nightmare had ended, but everything had changed. His mother's bruises had healed, her smile had returned, and their home had become a sanctuary instead of a prison. The 8-year-old boy who had once whispered desperate pleas for help into a phone now spoke with confidence, knowing that he was surrounded by protectors who would never let him down. The Bandidos' intervention had created something unprecedented in their community, a model for citizen action that inspired other groups to form similar protective networks. Local veterans organizations, church groups, and neighborhood associations began coordinating their own rapid response systems for families in crisis. The Brotherhood had proven that ordinary citizens could accomplish what overwhelmed institutions often failed to achieve: immediate, effective protection for the vulnerable. Tommy continued to check on Janet and Marcus regularly, their relationship evolving from emergency response to genuine family bond. The boy had found a father figure in the grizzled biker, while Janet discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. Derek never returned, having learned that some consequences cannot be avoided or manipulated away. The restraining order became unnecessary. The community itself had become the enforcement mechanism. The ripple effects of that night continued to spread far beyond Maple Street. Other Bandidos chapters across the country heard the story and implemented similar rapid response protocols for families in crisis. Social workers began partnering with motorcycle clubs, recognizing their unique ability to provide immediate protection while official channels moved through their bureaucratic processes. What had started as 50 bikers responding to a child's cry for help had evolved into a nationwide movement. As Marcus grew older, he never forgot the night when strangers became family and fear transformed into hope. The voicemail that had once carried terror became a story of triumph, proof that in a world often dominated by indifference, there are still those who will ride through the darkness to protect the innocent. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of real heroes who prove that brotherhood isn't just a word, it's a way of life that changes everything it touches.